So first thing we have to remember for our notes today is we have to remember our standard form for our quadratic, so our y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. We need to make sure it's in that form before we do anything with what we're going to be doing today. So standard form, got to have it. X squared first, then your x, and then in your letter if you have it. So what we're going to be learning today is we're going to be learning the quadratic formula. Now the nice thing about your quadratic formula is it will work to help you solve any kind of quadratic. It could be a quadratic that is actually factorable, but it will still work to help you get the answer, whereas you can't always factor every quadratic, so factoring doesn't work every time. Your quadratic formula will work every single time. So our formula for it starts with x equals, because that's what we're solving for. We're trying to solve for the values of x. Negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. It is a bit of a longer one. So again, that's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now there is a little song that goes along with it. You guys remember the song Pop Goes the Weasel from when you were little? Yeah. Twinkle, twinkle. I've never done it to the tune of Twinkle, Twinkle. No, it's not. Nope. So Pop Goes the Weasel. People use that song a lot to help them remember this quadratic formula. So they sit here and they sing the song. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And it helps them remember the song. It works every time. Personally, every time I write it, I'm singing the Pop Goes the Weasel song in my head as I'm writing it to help me remember it. So quickly, 17 times, it helps commit it to memory. So that's why we're going to write it every single time, because it's going to help you remember it. So here up in this little box, I have my little steps for you for how you're going to actually go through the quadratic formula. Instead of sitting here and reading through them, we're going to actually go through the steps itself. So this tells us to find the roots of the equation by using the quadratic formula. So let's write our formula first. So our x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I've got Madeline singing it, but you can't really tell what she's saying yet. So we're working on getting her words a little clearer. B squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So what I always do is I make myself a little list so that we can remember what is our a value, what is our b value, what is your c value. It's going to make your life easier, I promise. So if we keep in mind from above, this is in standard form. So your a values in front of your squared term, b values in front of your x, and then your c is the other number there. So in this problem, our a value is a 3. Our b value would be negative 5. That negative sign stays with the 5. And then our c here is a 2. So once you've identified what each of the terms are, all you have to do is plug it into here. But when you plug it in, you want to put parentheses around everything. So when I plug in for my b value, I'm going to do negative from the equation here. And then my b is a negative 5, so I put parentheses around my negative 5. Plus or minus. So then under the radical, I got my negative 5 squared minus 4 times my a of 3, my c of 2, all over 2 times a. And again, I put my a in parentheses. Everything you're plugging in for, put it in parentheses. So now, if you have the TI-84s, we can just plug this in your calculator just as it is here. So let's have you go to your calculator. Brianna, you're going to want to borrow one of ours. So first we have to get the fraction by pushing alpha y equals, and then we want the first choice. That gives us our fraction. Again, that was alpha y equals, and then choice 1. And then you're going to type it into your calculator just as you have written on your paper with all of the parentheses and everything. So we have negative parentheses negative 5. So I'm going to type in negative parentheses negative 5. Now what would come next? We got that plus or minus thing, right? The one thing with that is you have to do it separately. So I'm going to start with the plus. So I'm going to do plus my radical. So second x squared gives me my radical sign. So then we had parentheses negative 5 squared. And that was minus 4 times what?
3.
So again, all the parentheses just like we have on your paper. So once you have everything typed in up there, go arrow down 1. That takes you to the bottom. And we got 2 parentheses 3 down there. So once we have that all in there, hit enter. One of our answers is a 1. So I'm going to write x equals 1. It's not always works out that nice, but this one happened to. So now I need to do the same thing, only I need to do my minus sign. I did my plus sign, but I got to do my minus the radical here. So I'm going to show you a little shortcut. Instead of typing all that in again, if you hit second and then enter, it gives you that whole thing again. So all we have to do is arrow back through. See how far that takes me. It'll be a little easier on your calculators. Mine's a little delayed since it's on the computer. Go back to that plus sign and just change that to a subtraction sign, which I promise you is a lot faster than typing that whole thing in again. And then hit enter. And it gives us our other root, which is 2/3. So those are our 2 answers there, 1 and 2/3. So now our second one is just slightly different because our directions are slightly different. They told us to solve the equation x squared minus 4x minus 3 for values of x expressed in simplest radical form. So this one this time didn't tell us specifically to use the quadratic formula, but the fact that it said in simplest radical form, that's your hint that you've got to use the quadratic formula. So again, I'm going to write my formula, negative b and I get ready for my list, write my little a, my b, and my c. So our equation they told us to solve was here, x squared minus 4x minus 3 equals 0. So luckily for us, that's already in standard form. So what is our a value? 1. That's the imaginary number. It's not really imaginary. It's there. We just don't write it. Our b value? Negative 4. And c? Negative 3. So now go ahead, plug in your values for your a, b, and c. Remember to use all of your parentheses. So I have negative parentheses, negative 4. And then make sure yours looks like mine up the front after you have all yours plugged in. So again, as I said, we have to do this one a little bit differently because of the direction simplest radical form. So what happens when I have a negative, negative 4? Turns into a positive. So I have just a positive 4 out front, and then I got my plus or minus. So what I want you to do in your calculator right now, we got to figure out this value under the radical. So we got to type all of this into the calculator without the radical sign. So we got to type in parentheses negative 4 squared minus 4 parentheses 1 parentheses negative 3. Everything that was under the radical just without the radical sign. We're just trying to figure out what that number is. So we get a 28. And then for our denominator, what's 2 times 1? That gives us a 2. So now, since it says simplest radical form, this is why I put radicals on your problem of the day today. We've got to simplify this radical 28. So I kind of step out of the problem for a minute so I can do this. What is our perfect square that goes into 28? Our largest perfect square that goes into 28. Not 6. 6 doesn't go into it. Nope. 4. 4 times what? 7. So then our square root of 4 would be what? 2. And then the 7 stays under the radical. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to replace that in for the radical 28. So I get x equals 4 plus or minus 2 radical 7 all over 2. We just simplified our radical there. So then our last thing we have to check is we just have to make sure we've simplified everything. So if you look at your 3 numbers not under the radical, can you divide those all by the same number? 4, 2, and 2? Yeah, we can divide those by 2. What's 4 divided by 2? 2. 2 divided by 2? 1. And then 2 divided by 2? 1. So we get x equals 2 plus or minus 1 radical 7. And it would be all over 1, but we don't always have to put the all over 1 in a fraction, so we can just leave it like that, 2 plus or minus 1 radical 7. So then we still have our 2 answers like we had last time. Sometimes you may see it that they separate out the answers as 2 plus 1 radical 7 and then 2 minus 1 radical 7. So remember, we do still have the 2 answers. That just writes them together as 1. It's kind of like a little shorthand. All right, let's try a couple more. All right, so number 3 on the back, it tells us to solve the equation x squared minus x minus 5 equals 0 for the values of x to the nearest tenth. There's another clue that we have to use our quadratic equation because we have to round our answers to the nearest tenth, so that means it doesn't factor. So let's write our formula. And we'll start our little list, our A equals B equals C equals list. So what is our value of A in this problem? 1. It's that number that's there, but it's not written. Our B value? -1. And our C value? -5. So I want you guys to right now try on your own for a second. Plug those values into the equation first. So you're just doing the parentheses part, putting those in there. All right, so with all your parentheses, that's what we should look like. -1 plus or minus square root of -1 squared minus 4 times 1 times -5 all over 2 times 1. Now, since this one wants to the nearest tenth, we don't have to do simplest radical form This one's a little easier because we just type it in the calculator like we did for that first one. So let's go to our calculator. So again, we'll get our fraction first. So alpha y equals, choice 1, we get our fraction. And then we'll have you go ahead and start typing in like it's written on our paper. All of the parentheses and everything. So negative, negative 1. Again, practice typing this in. This one's tough, so you got to practice this. What'd you get? Okay, but we want to put it as nearest 10th.
Oh, right.
So do the one extra step and go 19 divided by 2. Oh, that's not right. You forgot your radical.
I think it's the same thing.
You forgot your radical. That's not quite. You got to put this negative 1 here in parentheses. That makes a big difference. Anybody get 2.79? Woo! All right, so the nearest tenth, though, what would that be? 2.8. So let's have you go do the other one. So we got to do minus the radical now. So we'll go hit second, enter, it puts all of it in there for us. And then we'll arrow back through, make that a subtraction sign instead of a plus sign. So I get negative 1.79. So to the nearest tenth, what do we get?
What did you just do?
I just changed it from a plus to a minus. So to the nearest tenth, how does this round? Negative 1 point what? 1.8. 1.8. All right, so our last one in our notes again. They want it in simplest radical form, so this one will take us just a little bit longer, but we'll get there. But is our equation in standard form? No. We got 2x plus 6 equals 5 over x. That's definitely not in standard form. So how do we get rid of this 5 over x thing here? We got to multiply it times x. Just times x. Because when you do that, remember, this is 5 divided by x. So the opposite of division is to multiply. So I would have just a 5 over there on my right side of the equal sign. So then on the other side, we have to distribute our x. So x times 2x gives us a 2x squared. X times 6 would give us a 6x. Now we still have one last thing to do to get this in standard form. Who thinks they know what it is? Give you a hint. Something to do with the 5. We got to subtract it. We got to move it over to that other side. So 2x squared plus 6x minus 5 equals 0. Now we've got our standard form. We got everything on the left side. We got a 0 over on the right side. So again, since it says in simplest radical form, we have to use our quadratic formula. So what is our a value this time? 2. Our b? 6. And our c? Negative 5. So again, let's have you go ahead, plug those into the formula. Do all your parentheses first. So there's with all of our parentheses, so we got to slowly clean this up a little bit since they want simplest radical form. So first I have -6, so that's just going to become -6. I didn't have a double negative, which turned it positive, so we start out with -6 there. So let's have you type into your calculator 6 squared minus 4 times 2 times -5. Let's see what our number under the radical is going to be. So 6 squared minus 4 times 2 times -5. Anybody get it? Nobody's got it yet? You're just typing it in what's under the radical. So 6 squared minus 4 times 2 times -5, 76. And then it's all over 2 times 2, which gives us 4. So again, we have to kind of step out of the problem for a second. We need to simplify our 76. So we got to find the largest perfect square that goes into 76. Largest perfect square that's going to go into 76. What'd you get, Seth?
4.
Yes, it's 4. 4 and what? 4 and 19. So the square root of 4 comes out as a 2. 19 stays under our square root sign. So again, I'm going to take this and replace the 76 with it. So we get -6 plus or minus 2 square root of 19 all over 4. So again, our last step is we got to try to reduce if possible. So that 6, that 2, and the 4, can we divide those all by the same number? Yeah, we can divide them all by 2. So 6 divided by 2 would give us 3. 2 divided by 2 gives us, and then 4 divided by 2, 2. So we get -3 plus or minus 1 square root of 19 all over 2. There's our final answer in simplest radical form.